Okay, we are live. So hi everyone, and hi to our audience watching. Welcome to this evening's discussion. I do again apologise for the technical glitch and slight delay. My laptop froze, so I guess in the age of COVID, we've kind of got to manoeuvre our way around things like this. So thank you once again for being with us this evening. Our discussion this evening is on women in business, positions of leadership. So once again, welcome to all our speakers. Viewers at home, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe whilst you can, and also, engage with this discussion once the talk gets started. Feel free to comment and leave questions, and we'll try our best to integrate them within the discussion. And if not, add them at the end in the question and answer session. I'm Iysha, a research fellow here at the Dialogue Society, and I'll be hosting this evening's discussion. And this is, of course, the fourth panel we've put on in relation to women and dialogue, and the second specifically around the topic of women empowerment. We're here, of course, with our experienced and vibrant list of panelists, and I'm sure we'll have both a fruitful and kind of stimulating discussion today. But our session is focused on the suppression of women's leadership in the workplace, the discrimination and interlinks between sexism, the gender pay gap, and other difficulties that I'm sure our speakers will kind of highlight in their talks, which are all crucial, of course, to kind of understanding the limits to the progression of women's rights and as our society as a whole. So without stealing any further time, as I kind of took a good 10 minutes at the beginning too, I'd like to kind of dive straight into the topic, and hopefully I'll introduce each speaker just before they go and give their talk, and then we can engage with questions, of course, like I said, and then we'll, after the talks, have a discussion between ourselves as panelists, and hopefully have a good, enjoyable discussion this evening. So our first speaker is Sue Liburd, MBE, who is unashamedly shifting thinking, which I think is a very bold statement, but definitely reflects Sue's personality and character. And she does that by helping businesses grow in the intersection with society, shaping them so they are well equipped for the future. She does essential work upholding her motto, which is when leaders know better, they do better. This includes, of course, advocating for active leadership, where leaders play a role in the betterment of the world, supporting communities to thrive and solve societal problems that they may face. So Sue, it's a pleasure to have you this evening. The microphone is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I want to talk about how we can better understand gender inequity for women in terms of leadership roles. And to understand that, I believe we need to start with an understanding, a fundamental understanding of the nature of organisations and institutions. Our institutions, our organisations, they really, really matter. Yeah, they add value to us as on an individual basis. They add value to us. They make a difference to us on a societal level. They provide us with a space for those of us that are in work, a place to go, to meet other people, to socialise, gives us our identity, sometimes our purpose. So they're very, very important. There's a range, obviously, of benefits. But organisations and institutions are gendered. And therefore, as a consequence, they can be quite difficult to change. Not impossible to change, obviously, because over the many, many years we've seen organisations develop and evolve. So we know that they can, but it's not necessarily easy, particularly the larger, monolithic, complex organisations that many of us find ourselves interacting with or working in. And some of the reasons why they are quite intractable, really, in terms of some of the thinking, I believe, is because we as a society, believe it or not, we want our organisations and our institutions to be stable, to be certain, to be reliable, to feel safe. So on some level, we also, may I say, collude in small letters with some of our complexity and some of the monolithic organisations that we find ourselves interacting with. But gendering is really and truly deeply embedded, I believe, in the fabric, in the DNA of our organisations. They can be seen, gendering can be seen at all levels in the HR cycle. And when I talk about the HR cycle, I'm talking about how we recruit and select people, how we onboard them, how we performance manage them, the nature of the training, so the opportunities that somebody in an organisation gets access to, they're gendered. Again, how we reward and we remunerate, how we compensate, they're gendered. And I'm sure, we'll get on and we'll talk about things like, the gender pay gap. But equally, when it comes to people taking sabbaticals, time out, leaving the organisation, exiting the organisation, we also see gendering all the way through. So our organisations are gendered. And at the heart, I believe, of the progression challenges for women, particularly women in leadership, doesn't typically lie just in what I call the formal structures, because they're the bits that, if you think about it, are quite easy almost to change. We can change policies, we can change the rules, we can change policy, we can change procedures. So we can change these things, and they relatively, like I say, feel quite easier to do. But it's where we look to the informal rules of an organisation that we find that some of the aspirations that we have as women in organisations to climb can sometimes then find themselves challenged. So it's in the informal. So maybe it's the language that we use, it's some of the stereotyping, it's some of the how we socialise in the organisation, it's the networks. We know, for example, in terms of networking brings huge benefits. And one of those key benefits is there's a particular opportunity. It gets shared often within a network. Men notoriously are better at leveraging the power of a network than women. And I appreciate I'm talking in generalizations. Obviously, there are always exceptions to the rule. So if we don't actively address the informal mechanisms within an organisation, what we can find then, it continues to be a challenge for women in particular to rise up the echelons, rise up the ranks, for want of a better description, in terms of some of our organisations. So we see there is a gender divide in our higher echelons, very much so. And we can also see that men and women, often have different opportunities presented to them in terms of particularly our larger, monolithic, complex organisations. We like to think our organisations are meritocracies. They're not. And all of the evidence clearly showing that, really. All right, so I'd like to add also that when we're looking at even the sectors whereby we have a high predominant female workforce, think about the health service, think about education, so teaching, social services, think about caring, think about librarianship, where we have high propensity of female workforce. What we also see there is that when men are working in those spaces and in those sectors, that they invariably don't suffer, let's say, detriment in the same way that women. So we get to see something like the glass elevator. So men move up the organisational hierarchy often more quickly than women. So it's not just in organisations where we've got predominantly, let's say, large percentages of men. We're finding it also this inequity, particularly in leadership and roles for women and women's opportunities in some of those other sectors as well. So what are some of the mistakes I think that organisations make? I'm, as an independent consultant, someone who sits on a range of boards, and going in and out of organisations across all sectors, what do I see as some of what I call the common pitfalls or some of the common mistakes that organisations make? Number one is that we always try to fix the women's problem. So we go, all right then, you know, we're committed, we want as an organisation, we want more women in leadership. And therefore what we do is we say women are part of the problem as well as part of the solution, of course. So we have a plethora of women-led initiatives. I'm not saying that they haven't added value. Yes, they have. So women-only workshops, women leadership courses, accelerators, and like I say, they have added some value. But the problem with that is, like I say, we're trying to fix the problem. We're saying there's something wrong with women, and therefore if we fix women, then they will be better able to take better, have a better uptake in terms of some of the opportunities that are presented to them. So one of the other things I would say is that by always just predominantly focusing on women and not necessarily focusing on our male colleagues, is that we're missing a trick. So if we focus also on our male colleagues, and I say that not just in offering what I call generic development programs that are just open to everybody, if we focus also on our male colleagues, they can become allies, they can become change agents in terms of supporting women moving up into more and more leadership positions. Again, one of the things we do is we hold women to a different set of standards, and that comes out of some of our wider beliefs and some of the embedded and entrenched stereotyping, for example, that we have. So if we see women, for example, as being more nurturing and more caring, and we see leadership being, you know, what we call strong and ruthless, as opposed to maybe strong and considerate, I would argue very much in recent years, and particularly in this year, we're seeing a different set of leadership competencies coming to the fore, and far more considerate and far more inclusivity and far more consideration to the needs of our individual team members. So I think that very much is shifting. But where we've held women to a different set of standards, I think also that's been a challenge within all our gendered organisations. And also I would argue that women suffer from what I call the, you know, the visibility penalty. So where women are in a minority in senior roles, then of course highly visible. So the pressure and the expectation on us is phenomenal. It's phenomenal in so much as other women will look to those women and expect them to be the gold standard. Our male colleagues look to those women to be the gold standard. And so therefore, if we have a bit of a bad hair day, or we're struggling a little bit, or we're asking for some support, then it's highly visible in the way that it's not necessarily so for our male colleagues. So when we start to look at some of the solutions, some of the things that we can start to think about, I would advocate that when we're talking about advancing women in leadership positions, is that we look at de-biasing organisation, try and de-bias the system, because the system is inherently gendered. So I'm conscious often when use the term de-biasing, everybody just automatically thinks about unconscious bias. I'm talking about things like likability bias. One of the things we see in leadership positions, men and women, and our colleagues that identify as being non-binary, is that we want to surround ourselves by people like us. And so we seek the familiar. Equally, you know, it's halos and horns. I like this person. So therefore we lean in, or a little bit more positive, or a little bit more favoured when we come to some of our dialogues or some of our recommendations to them. That stereotype bias that I've already alerted to is the taking a look at the stereotypes. Do we have a particular view in our organisations about the roles of men and women and our non-binary colleagues, and therefore that they are having an influence? And I would also say one of the other things for me that I've seen, particularly in commercial organisations that are driven by sales, where the argument is it's very much a meritocracy, but we see some performance support bias. And that is things like who gets the best leads? Well, if you have a view that says, actually, I think that men are better in these sales roles than women, their stats are showing then that they are better than women, we give the best leads to our male colleagues, not necessarily noticing actually that we're giving, let's say, less qualified or more challenging leads to women, who are then having to overcome far more obstacles and hurdles. And some of the organisations that I've worked with where we've flipped that on the head and said, all right, how about you give to your minorities, women, for example, or ethnic minorities, their best leads and see what happens. And without fail, what we've seen is that women equally match, if not excel, in these roles. So there's something in there around also our performance support bias. So I would argue, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to pause there. But if we have a look at debiasing our system, and if we have a look at starting to think about how we, every single one of us in organisations, can think about how we start a different conversation. If we are awake, if we notice, let's spark a conversation. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you ever so much for providing kind of a general overview into the kind of research and commentary on the field of women leadership, and kind of discussing about how the gendered perspectives impact the workforce in general. Even in areas where the female workforce may be at a higher rate than the male participants, it's more likely that males are going to have those leadership positions, even when the percentage of workforce, it may not kind of seem in their favour. And discussing the whole kind of process of debiasing the system. So thank you ever so much. If anyone does have any questions they'd like to direct at Sue, please do type and in the chat section on our live stream, and then I'll implement them into the Q&A session at the end. We're now on to our second speaker of the evening, Professor Mumford, who specialises in labour economics. She received her PhD from the Australian National University, and her interest areas are discrimination in the relative labour market position of women, networking in labour markets, job satisfaction, and the implications of using the family as a unit of analysis. Karen was also appointed CBE for services to economics and labour market diversity in 2016 year's honoured list, and it's definitely an honour to have you with us this evening, Karen. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd like to approach the topic in a slightly different way, because that's what I know more about. And so what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of evidence about a work environment that I'm very familiar with, and that's my work environment. And I think we can take away, we'll see that a lot of the messages that happen in economics approach other disciplines and also other fields. And you'll see just how good the guys are at being successful. I'd like to share my screen with you just so I can show you some numbers. Now, hopefully that's sharing. Is that sharing? Excellent. Okay, so hopefully also I can make it there. Right, so this is me. I work at the University of York in the management school, and I do a lot of work on labour economics and gender splits. And I'd like to show you some data about what it's like to be in the economics workforce, academic economics. So the Royal Economic Society started collecting data on the numbers of people working in academic economics in 1996. So this is a percentage of women that were in that workforce across the entire UK. So in 1996, less than 15% of the standard academic workforce were female. So that's people who are on research, teaching and academic contracts. If we include people that are research only, which typically were traditionally very much females, the numbers go up, but it was still quite small, so about 18%. Over the 20 years of the data, women went from less than 15% to about 1 in 4, 1 in 5, to about 25% of the data. Yep. So the workforce has increased. Women are much more likely to be academic economists, but they're still very clearly in the minority. Okay, so maybe the UK is different from other countries, but it's not really very different. So we compare associate professors, lecturers, and professors in different countries. Here's the UK here. So in 1996, 9.6% of the lecturers in the UK in economics were female, so about 1 in 10. At that stage, just over 4% of the professors were, so about 1 in 25 of the professors. And it's increased. We've done much better. So here we are, as we said a minute ago, around 25% now of the lecturers are female, and about 15% of the professors are female. So from 1 in 25 to about 1 in 6. And that's pretty similar in other countries. Here's Canada, similar sort of growth. Italy had a larger share of lecturers who were female to begin with, and they've gone up to 16% professors. So, you know, pretty much the same in all these different countries. So women are, you know, coming into the discipline, they're getting themselves known, they're getting promoted to the leadership roles in the discipline, they're becoming professors. So it's looking pretty good. Yeah. Okay, so let's look within gender at what's happening. Yeah. So here on the left, this is the females, just the females. Yeah. The top line is the lecturers. Yeah. So in 1996, roughly 70% of all the women were lecturers, and that's fallen down here to less than 50%. And at the same time, we can see this dotted line is the professors. So originally there was about 6% of the women were professors, and that's gone up here to about 16% of the women are professors. So, you know, thinking that's really good. You know, we've moved out of lecturers, we've moved into professors, and we've also moved into reader senior lecturer. So we're doing well. Let's look at the men. Yeah. So here's the men in the same time period. So the beginning of that time period, just over about 54% of the men were lecturers compared to over 70% of the women. Yeah. And just over 20% of the men were professors compared to, you know, more like 8%, 6-8%. Yeah. And over that time period, just track the professors, this little dotted line. And you can see that men are much more likely to be professors. In fact, now that is the most common academic grade for a male economist, being a professor. It's more common than it is for them to be a lecturer. So we've done well, they've done a whole lot better. Yeah. So the conditions that we've set up that have helped women to progress, to enter this workforce, but especially to progress in this workforce, has been very much taken up by men, and they've been very successful at being promoted to those top ranks. Okay, so Christina Session and I have a paper where we look at this, and what we did was survey all these academic economists. We've got lots of information on teaching evaluations, research outputs, job experience, quality of education, where they worked, how long they worked for, etc., etc., etc. And we tried to control for all of those factors that we thought would affect their promotion. And at the end of it all, these were the conditional promotion differences by gender. So in other words, what we found is that once we control for everything we could think of that might determine your promotion prospects, men were 10.45% more likely to be promoted to professor than women. And down here, men were 6.9% less likely to be lecturers. Yeah? So we couldn't find an explanation for these differences. We controlled for all the things we thought that we could get information on that we thought might be relevant. So how does this affect the gender pay gaps? So in 1999, David Blackerby and his colleagues did a study looking at gender pay gaps amongst academic economists. And at that time, very similarly, if you look down the bottom of these tables, you can see all the different things that they controlled for in the regressions. Yeah? And after controlling for all of those things, they found an unexplained gender pay gap of 9.4%. Yeah? And they found amongst the lecturers, the little stars show that they're statistically significant. They found amongst the lecturers, there was a 6% pay gap in favour of males. And professors, they had very few female professors in the data, less than 10. They didn't get a significant result, but also they got a very small result. When we came along in 2016, so almost 20 years later, we found that the gender pay gap overall has actually increased in academic economics. So it's gone from 9.4 to 10.3%. And where it's increased is not amongst the lecturers, which is much more equal now in terms of pay, it's amongst the professors. And the professorial pay gap is now 14%. Men are earning, amongst the male professors, compared to the female professors, men are earning 14% more. Yeah? And so what we find is not only over time have men become more successful at getting into those top ranks compared to women, but within those top ranks, they're earning more money. Yeah? And this, as Sue said, when we start looking into workplaces and into work environments, we find this over and over again. The men are better at moving into roles and into pathways that get them to those top leadership positions. If we looked at finance as a sector and looked at the top decile of pay, we'd get a pay gap for full-time employees of over 100% on gender. Yeah. And it's true if we look in the NHS, we start to find the occupations where the highest pay is, that's where the men move into. Yeah. So it's a mixture between providing themselves with all these skill sets that help them to get promoted, but even after we control for those skill sets, we find that they're more successful at moving into those jobs and at getting higher pay. So breaking it down into what we can do to change the world, as Sue says, it's not just about saying we need to improve the world for women. It's also about perhaps we should make the world a little bit more difficult for men. Perhaps we should think about what these avenues are, what sort of networking, what sort of avenues there are that men are much better at working, and thinking, how can we make that a more equal playing field? How can we make it so that women can also move into these upper positions and also get, eradicate these pay gains by getting higher pay themselves? Okay, that's what I wanted to, I'll stop sharing there. That's what I wanted to show you. Basically just, a little bit of an information or evidence base to try and link up with what we're doing. Shall I pass you back now?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen, for, sharing from your personal experience, actually. I mean, it was an academic study, but it's something that impacts you in kind of all areas, both the difference in employment and also the pay gap as you kind of presented to us in statistical form. Even though you controlled the skill sets as well, they're still getting paid more. So, painting at both what Sue said as well, that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to kind of balance the inequalities all the way around. It's not a women issue as such itself. So thank you ever so much for your contributions. We're now on to our next speaker. We have Rachel Elnaugh, who is with us. She is an award-winning entrepreneur who's created a multi-million market-leading Red Letter Days experience brand. She is now a business speaker, successfully published author, and award-winning business mentor, and is also the CEO of a digital publishing and marketing platforms for evolutionaries. So that's a very, very exciting bio to read out. Rachel, we're pleased to have you with us today. The microphone is yours.
Hi, Iysha. That's very kind of you to invite me on. And I said to Naran when she invited me to be part of this that I may not be of much help to support this official line. So you may have to hold your finger over the cutoff button if I stray into areas which you might find quite difficult. So to give this some context, maybe just to talk a bit about my entrepreneurial experience, because I came through the whole of schooling and coming into entrepreneurship at the time of the rise of the businesswoman. So women like Anita Roddick with Body Shop and Debbie Moore of Pineapple. And I was trained in the city in the 1980s. So the rise of the Margaret Thatcher years. And I have to say, I bought into the program, the Superwoman program, kind of hook, line and sinker as I was starting out on my business journey, which I eventually started in 1989. So just to give this some context. And it's funny, actually, because I've been binge watching season 4 of The Crown and having a little bit of flashback, nostalgic moment to that era of those archetypes, those super strong archetypes of Margaret Thatcher, Lady Diana, Princess Diana. And so I was actually very lucky when I went into business, because I had a wonderful training for business in that I had 4 brothers, 3 older brothers, and a childhood where it was quite a kind of rough and tumble, quite bullying childhood. So I had been trained by my upbringing, and we grew up above my dad's shop, which helped as well. But I had been trained how to fight and how to win when it came up to facing men. So that stood me in really good stead in business. And I created Red Letter Days, which was a struggling startup for a couple of years. Then we made a breakthrough, and we found the formula, and everything started to snowball. And that led to winning awards and really being exposed to the world of big business and capitalism. So I'm not talking about kind of small lifestyle businesses. I'm talking about multi-million-pound companies, and that led me to being on Dragon's Den, where I was the first female dragon alongside 4 quite ruthless alpha male capitalist archetypal men. So I really saw the inside of that world. And also I lost that business after 16 years, and I saw how ruthless the world of capitalism is, where entrepreneurs are seen as a commodity, a world which is run through the mind, not through the heart. And it was a very interesting journey. And losing that business led me on a whole other path of becoming a professional speaker and a business mentor, and getting very interested in what made people successful, what made one person successful in business and so many not. You may know the statistics that 2/3 of all small businesses fail, only 5% make any profit, only 1% turn over £1 million or more. In the statistics for females in business are even higher. There's a 90% failure rate of women who start businesses. 90% fail within the first 2 years. So it's a very interesting world. I also forgot to mention, as part of my story, that I also have 5 sons. And I had all of my sons while I was growing my business. And the way that I managed that was having probably a handful of days off to give birth. I think my shortest maternity leave was 2 days, and had loads of support, nannies, childminders, maternity nurses, took my children into the office, breastfed in between meetings, had the baby in the solicitor's office in the hallway while I was in a power meeting, and had to leave the meeting to go and breastfeed and then come back. In short, it was insanity. And one of the things that I've been doing over the past 10 years as part of this opening into the world of coaching, mentoring, and understanding energy and dynamics is to uninstall a lot of those programs. And I also have trained as well in trauma, and I understand now about childhood developmental trauma and how traumatized young children grow into very troubled adults. And I would even go so far as to say that all of the world's problems are because we have sociopaths as our leaders in politics, in capitalism, in government. And we have to actually, as women, take responsibility for a lot of those, particularly male leaders, because motherhood, and this is maybe controversial for you, but I'm going to say it anyway, motherhood is not valued in our society. And if I was going to make one change in the world, and if I was going to go back and relive my life again, it would be with the understanding that being a mother to children, particularly sons, I have 5 sons, being a mother is the most important role for women in our society. We do not honor the mother in any of its forms, whether it's the maternal mother. We don't give it any value. We don't give any training in being a mother, and we certainly don't give any prestige or support for it. So if I was, the first change that I would make is that I would make it the most valuable career choice for women on a par with becoming a professor in a university or prime minister or vice president of the United States. Because if we have healthy children who are not traumatized by being dumped in a nursery or with a childminder from the age of a few weeks, and I'm showing all my mother guilt here, we would have extremely evolved feminine and evolved masculine leaders. And I'd also like to say one thing about being in that world, particularly of capitalism and big business, and interfacing with a lot of other female leaders, and also looking back at myself when I was in that role. To become successful in those roles, women have to draw on huge amounts of their inner masculine energy. They have to move from being in the heart into being in the mind. You naturally become ruthless, because to succeed, you have to win at what is essentially a patriarchal game. So whilst I absolutely give so much respect to what Sue and Karen have both said already, again, if I was in charge of the world, I would collapse the patriarchal control system, which is all about money and power, and I would replace it with an evolved feminine system where the world was run like a family, where everyone gets looked after, where the focus is on healing and love and compassion, natural health, as opposed to allopathic health. And there is so much that is currently, we're out of balance. And if you want to take this archetype of the mother to its nth degree, the fact that we do not honor the mother is the reason why we have lost touch and are out of harmonic resonance with Gaia herself, Mother Earth. And Mother Earth is showing us in no uncertain terms that she is ill with the amount of toxicity and lack of balance and lack of harmonic resonance on this planet. I would go as far as to say that the patriarchal control system deliberately creates dissonance. It deliberately creates fear and anger and division. And the way that we are going to heal this system and heal the Mother Earth on which we live and heal all of these problems, whether they're pay gender gaps or women struggling, is to have a completely different way of viewing how we live, how we are being human beings on this planet. And a great awakening of consciousness it's actually underway. And that is truly what is going to transform and shift everything. And we only have to look at what is going on now with COVID-19, with the Great Reset, courtesy of Klaus Schwab, aged 83, and the World Economic Forum. The world is being changed in front of our very eyes by a very small group of capitalist-driven, mainly men, or certainly people working from their masculine energy, which is being driven by the mind, not by the heart. And we are on a very, very dangerous path right now. And this mandate to enforce vaccinations of DNA-changing, RNA-based vaccines, to mutate DNA, to move us even further out of harmonic alignment, harmonic resonance, and alignment with natural health, is the most grave and serious danger on this planet, second only to climate change. And it is down to every enlightened woman at the current time to stand up to what is unfolding and to say in the most strongest terms, no, we do not consent. There is a different way. So this is my message, and apologies if that doesn't fit with the kind of official tone and theme, but that's really what I really wanted to say from the heart. So thank you, Iysha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for expressing and sharing, your own personal experiences with, as you said, coming from Thatcher years, and what I can imagine to be a very tough, conflictual environment in the very kind of start and kickoff of the kind of capitalist enrichment of British society, and how it really kicked off with Thatcher, and then the legacy is obviously still continuing. And I think, you kind of apologized a couple of times, saying that perhaps, what you were saying wasn't in line with Sue and Karen, but I think what we're all talking about is some sort of a restructuring of society and of patriarchy. And maybe we're coming at it from different perspectives and different lived experiences. But I think we've all highlighted that something is wrong and something does need to be changed. And whether we're, from your own experience and kind of life changing, talking about experiences of bringing up children in that very tough environment, saying that you only had, 2 days of maternity leave once, and how, maybe you've channeled that through understandings of energy, and perhaps we all channel that and understand it in different ways. What we're all saying, I think, in essence, is the same thing, that something does need to change. So I'm sure that our viewers would have really appreciated your contributions, and I'm hoping we'll have some questions come in and we can have a lively discussion at the end of that. So thank you very much, Rachel. We're now on to our last speaker of the day, of course. Last but not least, Mehan, a student of economics at the University of Cambridge. She's also the president of the Cambridge University Women in Business, working to promote diversity and gender equality in the workplace. Maya supports providing females and non-binary students with a set of skills, knowledge, and network to help them succeed both at university and beyond. So maybe Maya is kind of like the champion leading the way for some sort of a restructuring, starting off very young in the university years. So thank you, Maya. Please feel free, the microphone's yours.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction, and thank you, Sue, Karen, and Rachel, for your insightful comments so far. Considering I'm still a student and yet to enter the workplace, I thought I'd maybe look at this issue from a bit of a different perspective and focus on the challenges that women face before reaching the workplace and kind of how we can try to overcome them. So I think there's definitely kind of knowing that gender discrimination exists, it's there in the workplace, and it affects the way women work and the opportunities they have. I think it really impacts the decisions that young people such as myself make. And I've noticed in the research there was a piece that was brought out using LinkedIn data, which showed that women tend to apply to 20% fewer jobs than men on average, and they're 16% less likely to apply to a job after viewing it. Also, women feel that they need to meet 100% of criteria, when men only apply after meeting around 60% of criteria. I think I've definitely, I'm one of these people who also think that I need to have every single skill set before I apply for something and need to be perfect for the role. And I think it shows that the lack of gender representation in the workforce really extends beyond the gender inequality in the workplace. And it goes towards kind of needing more women in the pipeline and changing the way women view themselves. I also think it stems from societal perceptions of men and women. So the Cambridge University Women's Society, which I am president of, we had a talk from Liv Garfield, who is the youngest female CEO of a FTSE 100 company. And she brought up a really interesting point. She said that women are often branded as being bossy or aggressive or empowering, when men acting the same way might be seen as being ambitious and assertive and decisive. So I think this highlights a real issue of women are often so afraid of being seen as unlikable or feeling the need to portray a certain image that they don't put themselves forward, and they're deterred from kind of putting themselves first, applying for leadership roles and being confident because they feel that they need to fit certain gender stereotypes. But I think that we need to kind of do the opposite, encourage females to be assertive and ambitious. They can have these same qualities. And it doesn't mean that they are a lesser version of themselves. It means that they're not passing up on opportunities. They're asking for the right amount of pay. They're making the decisions that they should be making and questioning things that aren't right. I think Bosma, the chief marketing officer of Netflix, put this quite well when she said that women have been told a lie. We've been told that we have to be understated, we have to put our heads down, we have to be humble. But now we need to start telling women the truth. And I think that really sums up the issue quite nicely. So in terms of my own experience, the Cambridge Women in Business Society, CAMWIB, and we are trying to support and empower females and non-binary students so that, yeah, they have the skills, the connections, the knowledge that they need to succeed at university and also in their careers. And after speaking to quite a few of our members, I've realised that often the issue is that of self-doubt and kind of the feeling of imposter syndrome, which I definitely suffered from myself, when women don't feel that they kind of measure up to their male counterparts, or they often doubt themselves. So I think it's extremely important that we provide role models, including the other speakers on this panel, and we show that women can be successful. So that's why we host events where women share their experiences and some of the challenges that they've faced and really how they have overcome them and managed to become so successful. I definitely think that progress has been made, even at Cambridge University, a place that didn't even accept or allow women to have degrees until the 1940s. It was actually the last British university to do so. Now celebrates females and promotes gender equality. For example, our society hosted an International Women's Day event earlier in March, and our speaker was actually a student at the University of Cambridge. She's called Amika George, and she started the Free Periods campaign to end period poverty. So just having inspiring females like that around at Cambridge University really encourages other females to go for leadership roles and to celebrate themselves rather than doubting themselves or worrying that they're not good enough. I think the number of women who are in positions of power at Cambridge really demonstrates how far the university has come. So, for example, the oldest college, Peterhouse, had a female JCR president last year. The Cambridge Union Society had a female president last year. The current Cambridge Consulting Society also has a female president. So I think these successful and inspiring females in position of leadership should help others to realise that they can also be the same and they can strive to achieve what they might have seen as unachievable or unattainable. However, I do recognise that more does need to be done. I think Sue actually touched on this issue before, but the idea of not just educating or focusing on women, but also educating men as well, and maybe thinking about their perceptions of women and the unconscious biases that they have. To bring in an example of something like a personal experience of mine. So when I was applying for internships in sales and trading, which is known to be a male-dominated industry, and I was successful and a few of my male colleagues were not, some actually made some comments about the fact that the only reason I was successful was because I was a woman, or particularly I was an Asian woman. And I think this question of tokenism is really quite insulting to female accomplishments and our hard work, because women aren't succeeding because they're ticking certain boxes. They are succeeding because they are good at what they do, or they're the best at what they do. So I think we should make sure that we're valuing women's achievements rather than undermining them. And I really hope that discussions such as the one that we're currently having will educate both men and women and encourage women to apply for leadership roles, and then help to achieve gender equality in the workplace and all walks of life. So I think I will end it there, but thank you very much and looking forward to the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Maya, for highlighting societal perceptions of gender and the kind of commentary on feeling unlikable and struggling to put ourselves first, which I think as a young female myself I have frequently experienced too. Difficulty with trying to be assertive perhaps and telling the truth, but these are things that perhaps we need to overcome, and also telling us about the work that you've done and the various other kind of female leaders on society in your societies on campus, and possibly, you know, kind of how they've possibly tackled the imposter syndrome as you kind of titled it, which is really interesting. And yeah, you know, touching upon helping one another and tackling the unconscious bias that males may have, but us as females may also have. So it was definitely an enjoyable talk to listen to. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our speakers. I'm just going to scan through the questions and see if we've got any that have come up. If not, we have some prepared, and then hopefully we can engage in discussion based on those, and then add the ones that come through. I don't think we've got any so far, just some comments on the YouTube live. So I just start off with the first question that we've prepared, and perhaps if anyone just wants to tackle the question, they can volunteer first. What advice would you give to a young woman who wants to succeed in the workplace? And perhaps we can touch upon the single most important advice that you would give, perhaps, if anyone wants to go first.
Shall I start? Yeah, I would say to try to find an occupation that provides good work flexibility, so they can balance up their work life. Yeah, and I don't think that's just for women as well. I think that's for men. And one thing I find really reassuring is that the younger people seem to be striving for that, and that's true amongst males and females. And I think that just gives you the flexibility. You know, when Rachel was saying she had 2 days off, I was really fortunate because academic environment, I think I had 18 weeks off with my first and 24 weeks off with my second, and always a flexible work environment, so I could, you know, leave early and do the school run and then work later. And that just made it really, really easy for me not to feel torn and feel that I wasn't being a good parent. And, you know, fortunately, my husband had exactly the same work environment and the same working conditions. And I think that just, you know, if only the women take maternity leave, then you lose work experience, you lose training opportunities, you lose contacts. But if the men are also taking parental leave at the same rate, then the impact is very equivalent. And it allows you to succeed and still balance up your work life. So personally, that's what I'd say. If you want to be able to succeed, try and find a work environment that will give you the opportunity to have work-life balance.
My advice would be around two particular areas. I think, first of all, is don't allow people to be dream stealers. You know, arriving, you know, you're thinking about a role, you've managed to go through the recruitment selection process, you've been appointed. Don't allow externals to turn around and reset your dreams. So I just, you know, don't surround yourself by dream stealers. My second piece of advice would also be around join in any organisation, any support networks. So find community, safe space within your working environment. And if you can't, make sure you've got a support network outside, not just family members and close friends, but a professional network as well, where you can be your truly authentic self, you can be vulnerable, and you can get some wise and sage advice. So they're the couple of things I would add.
I think the best piece of advice that I've been given is to always put yourself out there. Don't let the fear of failing or not being good enough stop you from trying to go after your goals. You can't succeed if you don't present yourself to take advantage of the opportunity. So yeah, always put yourself out there and believe in yourself. And in the end, you manage your own success. And I think that's really important.
Should I add something here, Iysha?
Go ahead.
I would just say to be very aware that whatever organization you decide to go into, whether it's a university or whether it's a corporate, you're going into a machine, and every machine has a program and a programming and a rules and a regulations, which is actually one of the beauties of going into business and entrepreneurship. So just going back to what Karen just said about the maternity leave, no one forced me to have 2 days maternity leave. I could have, as an entrepreneur, I could have had 2 years maternity leave if I'd wanted, but it was the program that I'd bought into that was running the show. And so being very aware of the program, because the patriarchal system, the control system, the programming is it's in the subconscious, and it's very intense. And we're programmed from the moment we go to school, and we're conditioned to go from school into university and then into a kind of 9-to-5 job, or whatever flexible hours you want to call it. So being very, very aware of the programs that are running the show within whatever institution you decide to go into, whether it's becoming an MP and going into the Houses of Parliament, or, you know, all of these organizations are machines. They are typically created, something like University of Cambridge, absolutely created by the patriarchal control system. So yes, whilst women are finding a way to work the machine to their advantage, be very aware that there is a massive advantage for men within these capitalist and patriarchal systems. So sorry to keep banging this drum, but you know,
You're muted, Rachel. I think you just...
I kind of assumed you might have cut me off there because my system, and I got muted. I was like, oh my God, maybe I've gone too far. But the interesting thing is, and having bought in, just to complete here, having bought into all of that kind of being an assertive woman, doing all the assertiveness training, you know, when I was trying to climb my way up to success, even putting my staff through assertiveness training programs. I mean, I just look back and I actually feel quite ashamed, because I was trying to program women to be something that they weren't. And I would much prefer to create an environment, and I think this picks up on what Sue said, an environment where women can be vulnerable, which is a totally safe space, where other qualities are valued, like intuition, like compassion. So beware of the machine that you're stepping into, is my advice to anyone, because the machine will have a program, and choose your machine carefully would be my biggest piece of advice.
Rachel, just to kind of follow up on that, I mean, isn't it inevitable that the majority of us will be a part of this machine, and that I mean, the career opportunities out there for all of us, shouldn't it? I mean, I'm assuming you're not going to disagree when I say that, you know, we act to kind of make these workplaces more compassionate, but isn't it inevitable that we're all going to be part of this machine? Unless we have some kind of radical restructuring of the whole of society, of course.
Well, that's what's currently going on. I mean, I would even question whether there will be jobs next year, many jobs at all. I think that we are going through this great reset, is going to be the greatest shakeout in society that the world has ever seen. And I actually I'm really concerned for for everyone, actually, especially the future generations who are diligently getting all of their examinations and grades, and while the entire economies are going to crash, and we are headed on an economic collision course for sure right now. So I don't want to be too doom and gloom, but I think a lot of this is kind of tinkering around the edges. I think that the issue is way bigger than things like pay gaps and which career choice to go to. You know, it's up to women to really start visioning a different way of being, and to question the machines that we're trying to be successful within.
Okay. Thank you for your contribution. We've just got another question coming through from the audience. How can we encourage specifically BME society women to thrive? I mean, I think the difficulties that BME women particularly experience both in the workplace and then perhaps within their own societies to thrive, and barriers and biases, the list could be endless. But does anyone have any thoughts on how we can encourage specifically these women to thrive in the workforce?
Would you like me to start on that one? Well, I think a lot of what's already been said relates to people who are from a different racial or ethnic group, to be honest. I don't think we've just talked about women in a homogenized way, far from it. But whenever you are a minority, then we're immediately, we're very, very visible. And therefore, it comes back to, as I say, organisations are, systemic in terms of the way that they are structured. So there are some inbuilt obstacles and challenges. So I do think it's about picking up on some of the other points. It is about being bold and courageous. It is about being pioneering. It is about making sure that you've got a support, though, because it can be very draining and quite hard work always to feel as though you are the lone voice or you're always leading from the front. So it is important that people have support networks. And I think it's about calling things out. And if this year has taught the world anything in terms of, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, is that there's a window of opportunity right now. There's a huge amount of leadership and management fragility, particularly in terms of the white community. And as a consequence, I think that can be leveraged to move their dial a little. I have to say, I don't think we're necessarily going to get huge swathes of change personally. Being a woman of a certain age and having seen some of these iterations before, but right now there is a little bit of a window. So for anybody who's from a Black, Asian or ethnic minority community, we've got an opportunity, I think, at the moment. So I do think it's time for us to be bold and to be courageous, to challenge, to speak out, and to ask. Not sit back and wait for somebody to present us with the particular bowl full of rice. I think we can be far more proactive at the moment.
Just to echo what Sue said, I definitely completely agree with all of that. And I also think that it's not just the responsibility of women or those of ethnic minorities to try and bring about the change, but actually white people or men should also call out when things are wrong. And I think that maybe the fact that they're not affected by certain issues that we are just shows that they are in a position of privilege, and they should use that to our benefit, to society's benefit. And it's really something that we should all be working towards, rather than just the responsibility of women or BME individuals to try and bring about that change.
Well, thank you, Maya, Karen, Sue, and Rachel. I'm quite conscious of the time. We did start 10 minutes late, but it has been an hour since I was able to get the laptop back and up and running. Does anyone have any questions for one another, perhaps on the speeches that we gave? And perhaps we could use this time to kind of say a last few words and close off the discussion together. If anyone's got any comments or commentary. Sue, yeah.
I would just like to say to all of our fellow panelists, what is lovely is it feels as though we're all moving in the same direction, just slightly from different lenses. And I think, this wonderful idea of this mosaic, I think, can really start to shift things. I felt really reassured, and I'm taking away a wonderful quote. Actually, it's yours, Rachel. Choose your machine carefully. I like it.
Yep, if anyone else has got any questions, comments, perhaps to add on.
I just wanted to pick up on something that Maya said earlier, and about this this selection. I just think it's a very fascinating situation that we have in America right now, where Kamala Harris, it looks like she's vice president if Trump will ever concede that he's lost. She was a very interesting choice, wasn't she? Because not only is she essentially mixed race but female, but it's a really, really interesting political choice to choose almost like a trophy vice president that ticked all these boxes to win an election. And I'm not saying she's not great for the job, far from it, but I just think that we have to be really aware of the sort of manipulation which is going on, and almost using women, using race to perpetuate the machine. It's a very fascinating topic, just to be really aware, consciously aware of what's going on and what's playing out, and the motives behind choices and the way that we're being persuaded and swayed. It's very, very fascinating times.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you everyone once again for being here. I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion, and like Sue said, it's kind of like a mosaic coming together and looking at the issue from a variety of different perspectives, and I'm sure there are this many other perspectives or even more perspectives that we could have tackled the issue from. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure our viewers have also enjoyed the discussion this evening. Thank you for making time for us and being here with us and voicing your own special, both from an academic perspective, Karen, and from lived experiences, the rest of us, of really crucial work. So thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you all. I hope you take care and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.